Okay, so then I'll keep going now with stuff that we've done with new material. And there's two things that are on the agenda. One was information structure that was promised for last time, and I only got to it very sketchily. And the other thing is anaphora. Okay, and then what's still on the syllabus is coordination, but unless there's like much passion for coordination, I would actually do instead a session on complex predicates that I would record and let you guys watch. Unless somebody really says, I've been wanting to find out about coordination all semester, and now you're taking it off the agenda. No? And complex predicates is fun because there's a lot of stuff going on in it as well. So in a way, it might be a summary of what you're thinking of. Okay, so I'll do that. This will be recorded, hopefully, and these two we'll try to do this session. Okay, so information structure. So the last few times we did functional uncertainty. And we looked at long-distance dependencies. Okay. And I had a note to myself that I wanted to actually... okay, but first we'll say, okay, well, I'll ask you, what's functional uncertainty and what's long-distance dependencies? Cast your mind back to the last year. Yeah. Okay, long-distance dependencies are things like questions and what did you say? Topicalization. So not all questions in all languages are long-distance dependencies, but they are in English. So you have things like who did you see? Where the idea is that the who starts out there, or who did you think you saw? Okay, so where the idea is that this who is connected to the verb see over here. And topicalization, there the examples we had were things like beans, I think Jane likes. Or again, the idea was that this beans here is connected to the verb down there. Okay? So those were long-distance dependencies. And we dealt with long-distance dependencies within LFG by using functional uncertainty. And what was functional uncertainty in particular? How did that work? Anybody remember? So I would have a tree like this. So I'd have a tree like this for this topicalization example. And then how do we know that beans actually is the object of likes? How did we do that? Yeah, we had a functional uncertainty equation, a functional uncertainty path. We defined a functional uncertainty path where we figured out what this could be, right? So we had something like, we said this is a topic. And then we said, oh, in addition to being a topic, it's also, we said something like, well, this could be an x-comps or a comp, however many they are, 0 or infinitely many in principle, object or object 2, object theta. Remember that? We had that long, complicated path. So the idea was that this functional uncertainty path says, well, I know this is somebody's grammatical function. I don't know how far embedded this is, but this is the path of possibilities. And then likes down here will at some point say, oh, I need an object. And then you'll figure out that it has to be this object. Okay, and that's what we defined for that. Now, there was one thing I wanted to point out, that the way I presented it last time, it works for all verbs, but actually that's not quite true. This is an example from Mary Dalrymple's book. Just we whispered. This actually doesn't work in English. Okay, so there's a certain class of verbs in English, but also this happens for other languages which don't allow this kind of extraction, this kind of long distance dependency. So there's actually a lexical property going on here, where you then have to mark which verbs can actually do this and which can't. So I just wanted to put that in as a caveat. Yeah. And Mary Dalrymple has a longer discussion of this in her book. Okay. This will be part of homework 3. You'll be doing these long distance dependencies. Any questions on this before I move on to the next topic? No? Okay. So, one thing that we've been saying all along is I've been using this notion of topicalization, and I've been writing topic in here. But in fact, there's been and this is the way it used to be done in classic LFG. But in fact, there's been a whole lot of work on what is called information structure, not just within LFG, but also outside of LFG. And there's been some discussions about how to do this. And right now there's two ways of doing it. So there's the Bresnan way, and she has so-called discourse functions. And she has them at F structure in the way that we've been doing it so far. Okay, so that would be when you have something like this sentence. And what we had with the sentence with beans is, what do we have? Pred, think. The example that we just had has a subject and a comp, right? And the subject is I. The comp is the pred like, subject object, and then we have a subject in here, which is, what did we say, beans? What was this? I just erased it, which was bad, but what was the sentence that we had? Beans, I think that Jane, right? That Jane likes. So I'm just shortcutting this stuff here. And then we would have a topic here. And we would say the topic is the same as this object. Okay, that's what our F structures have looked so far. So I've had something like this topic thing in here. And this is the Bresnan approach, in a sense. So if you look at her 2001 book, that's what she has in there. There's sort of what I'll call the but and king approach, which is a separate projection. So Tracy King, in her dissertation, looked at focus in Russian, topic and focus in Russian. And she started arguing that these kinds of discourse functions have no business at F structure. They're talking about something completely different, and they should be in a separate projection, which in the end is now known as information structure. Or I structure. And we have a few papers where we argued for this in the early to mid-90s. And then this basic approach has been taken up by several other people. Although, so some people in the LFG community follow this basic approach where you have the discourse functions at the F structure, and another set of people follow this approach where you have a different projection. And I'll tell you about the different projection in a bit. And this is what Mary Dalrymple also talks about in her book. Okay, so we're following Mary Dalrymple's book. Okay, now there's a huge literature on information structure or discourse functions, whatever they're called. It's too huge for me to get in here. I'm just going to do it very quickly. But there's two general big things: topic, focus. Those are the two main ones. If you look at Dalrymple page 184, she gives you some definitions of these things. she's actually basing herself on papers by myself and Tracy. But that's good. So topic is, in our system, is old or known information. Known information. Okay, and it's sort of what the thing is about. Okay. What clause is about. About. And focus tends to be new information. Let's see, what clever definition did we have? And it's prominent. If this topic interests somebody more and they would like to get into big semantics on this, semantics pragmatics, there's a very good paper by Manfred Krifka, a recent one, where he talks about these things in some more detail, much more detail than I can go into here. And he does a good job of going through all the previous literature on this. Okay, and with an LFG, there's a dissertation by Louise Mycock, where she looks at Japanese, Hungarian, and English, and looks at information structure in that. So if somebody was into this, they could look into these things. Right. Yes, and that's her name. Okay, so there's a question about how to define all these things. I won't talk about it very much, but with focus, you can generally tell what's in focus. One test is sort of if you have a question. So if you say something like, "What did Joe eat for breakfast?" What would you answer? Say, what did he eat for breakfast? Toast. Okay, he ate toast for breakfast. So how would you answer this question? Not just toast, a whole sentence. He or Joe ate toast for breakfast. Okay, so in this case, this thing is your focus, right? This is what's new. Somebody's asked for this information. And this thing is your topic. And generally, if something is a topic, you tend to be able to replace it with a pronoun as well, right? Because this is old information. You know it's about Joe. So you don't have to do Joe again. You can just say he. And if we have something like, who ate toast for breakfast? How would you answer that? You would say Joe, and you would stress it a bit too. Yeah. You could either say Joe did, or you could say Joe ate toast, or it for breakfast. Okay, and in this case, this thing is now your focus. So that's a very rough and ready kind of application of this. It's a very complex type of thing. And there's more types of discourse functions, which I won't go into here. What I want to go into here is the idea of a separate projection. Why do we think it should be a separate projection? Well, you can also You can also focus the verb. You can say, something like, what did Joe do yesterday? And then, what would you say? What did he do yesterday? He skipped class. And in this thing, what's in focus? Well, actually the verb, right? This is maybe not such a good example. You could say, this is good enough. Okay. So now let's look at this if we try to do something like similar to this. I'll put it on here. We'll say, okay, we have a pred, skip, and it has a subject and an object. And the subject is Joe or he. And the object is class. And then we have a focus. We have a topic. The topic is not a problem. The topic is he, right? That's okay. The focus, we said, is the verb. So how do we do that? Well, actually then it should be the whole thing, right? It should be this whole F structure. Because that's where the verb is. The verb is at the top level of the F structure. So we say the verb is in focus. Then where are we pointing to with focus? Well, we have to point to the whole F structure. But that means that the whole F structure is in focus. Okay, so if we do things this way, there's no way to distinguish between all sentence focus, which does exist, or verb focus, which also exists. Yeah, because the way LFG is set up, when you point at the verb, it's the head of the clause, you're pointing at the whole clause. You're pointing at the verb, it says I have a subject and an object, and it's all contained in here. Okay, and this is a point that Tracy King made in a paper in 1997, where she pointed this out. And she said, this is not the right way to go about representing information structure. You tend to run into problems like this. So that's why we developed the information structure approach. And the alternative approach gives you a bit more insight into how LFG's architecture works. And that is this. So LFG has a projection architecture. Okay, and we've been working with this all along. But I'm not sure you guys know what this means, really. No. So we have a C structure, right? And we have an F structure with some stuff in it. How do we get from one to the other? We did that part. So how are these two related? With the phi projection, right? There's a phi projection that goes, how do you do phi? Like this, right? Okay, and the phi projection is something we've been using all along with stuff like ups, pred is equal to whatever, and ups tense is equal to future, whatever. Okay, what this stands for, this up arrow, it stands for, it says go from here. Where is it? For the F projection, take what's in the mother node and put it in the F projection. Okay, and this stands for the F projection, take what's on this current node and put it in the F structure. And we went through that at the beginning. I'm not going to go through it again. Okay, but these are instructions. This up arrow actually means with respect to the F projection, the phi projection, take the information associated with the mother node and put it there in a certain way. With respect to the phi projection, take the information associated with the current node and put it in the F structure in a certain way. You guys, some of you looking at me blankly? But that's what this is doing, right? So if we had something like this, what this is saying, take what's in my current node, call it an object, and associate it with a mother node. Okay, so at the level of the mother node, we know that this is its object. The VP's object is what's in this NP. And you can go back and read Dalrymple's chapter 2. All about it. But that's what's happening here, okay? It's saying with respect to a certain projection, the phi or the F projection, this information means certain things. Take whatever it's at the current node, associate it with the mother node. Is that clear to everybody, or should I actually show it with an example? Show it with an example? Or show it with an example? Or is it clear? It's clear? It's clear? Okay, good. So then, these are just, so these up and down arrows are just shortcuts for saying that. And in principle, what you can do is you can have any other projection. You can have, in principle, as many projections as you like in LFG. And in several orders. So we've always been going this way, but in principle, it's possible to do the inverse projection and go the other way. So if you have an F structure, you can define an inverse projection and get a C structure. And this is not relevant for you right now, but this is what happens when we do computational applications and we generate. We start from an abstract representation and we go to a string. So this can happen as well. So these are mathematical functions. They can go in either direction. And I won't go into the mathematics of it. But that's in principle true. Okay, so we have C structure. We can go to the F structure via the phi projection. In very classical LFG, you could also go then from the F structure to the semantics. Well, this is what you actually do in LFG via the sigma projection. Okay. And one thing we started doing then, this is what Tracy and I innovated, this is all classical LFG. What we innovated is that you could go to the I structure as well via the I projection. How does she do it? By the how do you say it, iota projection? How do you write that without a thing? You can go to I structure. The Greek letter, iota, yeah? However you write that. Like this. Yeah, like an I without a dot. And you can define how to get there just the same way. So you say, with respect to this projection, talk about the mother node or talk about the current node. Mother node with respect to I structure, current node. To I structure. Okay, so you can define the same kinds of annotations. So now instead of doing what we had before, which is if we had something like this, and we said ups topic equals down. What we can do now, let's see how Mary has it. What we could write instead is to say, with respect to this thing, let's see how she writes it. I'm so used to doing implementations that I forget how to do it in the real language. Okay, and then you can still have your topic path where you say, by the way, this could be some kind of X comp, however many. Okay, so you can annotate your C structures with F structure information, just like we've always done, but you can also annotate it with I structure information or other kinds of information. If you want to make up your new projection, and some people do. I think I've made up the most projections within LFG. I think I hold a record. People get upset at me. But basically you can do that. Okay? I mean, you should have a good reason for making a projection. You can't just make up any old projections. But there seems to be a good reason to have that. And then you can annotate your C structure rules that way. And there's quite a lot of debate actually about relationship between I structure right now, prosody, morphology, syntax, semantics, how does it all hang together, and the architecture actually gets quite complicated because in principle, for those of you who know a bit more about it, the I structure also has repercussions for semantics, so you want those two to talk to each other, etc. Okay, so now what should your I structure look like? Well, you can think about it in many ways. There's several different top ideas you could take. We decided to make it look like an AVM as well. So, but you could do anything with it. So just to do a simple example, what we would then do for something like he ate toast. Okay, this is our focus. This is our topic. What we would do is we would have this kind of let me see what we do here. This will be a VP. This will be a V and an NP. So this will be up equals down. This will be up subject is down, right? This will just be up equals down. This will be up's object is down. This is what we know so far. And now we will add some other types of annotations, the I structure annotations. Up's topic is equal to, and here we would say the same, except it would be focus. And that would then result in an F structure that we are familiar with, where we would have a pred, eat, subject, object, and the subject would be he, and the object would be toast. Yeah.
The rest of the I section is I, and in front is
The iota. Oh, then I made a mistake. Yeah. Like I said, in grammar implementation, we don't have these Greek letters. We just say then I, so I get confused. So that's my problem. But I'm trying to teach it to you how Mary Dalrymple does it, so that you can look that up. Okay, and then we have the I structure, would be built up in parallel to the F structure, right? We have both types of things going on here. So we would have a topic, which would be he, and a focus, which would be toast. And that's actually it. So in this example, there's not much difference going on, right? I mean, we just have two things, and we have we have subject, which is topic, and an object, which is focus, which is a very normal thing to happen. But you could have them in a different way around. The subject could be in focus, the object could be topic. Yeah.
Do you also have sentences as topic and focus, or parts of a sentence?
Yeah. So you can have an all focus sentence that happens. Yeah. And then you would have just the whole thing in the. Yeah. So in fact, actually, this is not quite right, because we said these are all sets. So if you had an all-focus sentence, then you would put everything into that set. So you can have multiple topics across languages and multiple foci, or different types of foci. Okay, but I'm not going to get into much more of this. This is sort of what Tracy and I did a while ago. Louise Mycock has a better or a newer version of this. And then I've recently started working on this again with respect to questions, and I have a different proposal again. But this is all stuff that's changing and being debated right now. So I won't teach you all of that. I just want you to be aware of that. And also, oh yeah, I should also mention for sure, there's a whole big book, Dalrymple and Nikolaeva, on information structure and case marking. Structure and case marking. And they work out an alternative architecture within LFG that is very, very much semantically oriented, and work out an alternative way of doing information structure as well. Okay, so the main things I want to get across is that you have the possibility for having different kinds of projections. Yeah. You can make up new ones. You should be able to justify them. But LFG's architecture is quite complex in this way. We've mainly been doing C structure, F structure, but there's many more things going on in people's analyses. The way the projection architecture works mainly is that you have it go off the C structure, but you can also do other stuff. You can do more complicated things, and then that you can represent more information at different types of levels of representation. So it's very, very different from syntax that you might be used to from other classes, where everything happens in a tree. Yeah, here we actually make up new projections and new representations as we think we need them. Okay, questions about this? Okay, so now we just have 15 minutes left for anaphora. So that's not going to work. So I'll have to.
Information structure, isn't it more or less related to the semantic of it?
So yes and no. So information structure is related to pragmatics, because you're talking about what sentences are about, what's the focus, etc. And yes, to the semantics, but the reason we have it at a separate level also is that so English is not that great in a language for this, but in many sort of free word order languages, you use word order. Or also in Japanese, you have particles that mark something as a topic or as a focus. And what the precise interpretation is only becomes clear when you calculate the context as well. So what this information structure lets you do, it lets you say something like, oh, this is the topic, and there's a very broad definition of topic. Or this is the focus, and there's a fairly broad definition of focus. But what exactly it means in terms of the context, You want to leave up to the pragmatics later, and the pragmatics needs to calculate in the context and discourse, anaphora, etc. Okay? So it's a way of saying, it's a way of, for the syntax, it's a way for the syntax of saying, I know this is a topic. I don't know what the precise interpretation is, but I know it's a topic. Does that make sense? So in German, it seems to be the thing that comes before the verb seems to be pretty much a topic most of the time. Yeah? Not always again, because you have stress, etc. in German, but most of the time. In Hungarian, famous language, for discourse, there's a woman called Kish, and she talked about discourse configurationality. For Hungarian. And what she showed is that there's, in Hungarian, it's very clearly certain positions. I think just before the verb is always the focus position. Whatever is found just before the verb is always the focus. What kind of focus you then still have to calculate? I think initial is always topic. Not sure on that, but basically she could show that in Hungarian you have certain positions associated with certain information structural notions. Yeah? So what this information structure does is it goes through the syntax and says, oh, I know, because this thing is here, I know it's a focus. And then you figure out exactly what kind of focus is going on. Other questions? It's a broad topic, actually, this, because you're getting into prosody, because focus tends to be stressed, and then you have to figure out what kind of stress there is. Topics tends to be de-emphasized, but not always. You can have contrastive topics. So there's a huge amount of stuff you can research on here. Yeah?
How is the computer application dealing with it on the basis of exposition in the sentence?
So there's only one implementation that I know of, and that is the one Tracy and I did. We did a small implementation for Bengali, and there we did it on the basis of position. Yeah. And we pretended we knew about prosody, but we didn't really. I can show that implementation if you're interested. And right now there's a debate between us and Oxford. So in Oxford we have these guys, Lowy and Mycock. And they're looking at stuff, so they're trying to do prosody and semantics and syntax all in one. And over here it's Tina Bögel, and she's focusing more on prosody and syntax and morphology, and is trying to figure out what the architecture would look like, etc. And she's coming at it, that's why I mentioned it, she's coming at it from a computational perspective, so she's actually going to try and implement something, whereas they're coming from a very theoretical perspective. So they're not going to implement something. But it's not clear exactly how it's looking like. That's still being done. Do you guys want to see the implementation, just to see what it looks like? Okay, then I'll do that in the last 5 minutes. Okay, where's my thing? pretty sure I brought my doohickey. There it is. So this is just a very, very small implementation. And we based it on a paper by Aditi Lahiri, where she looked at focus clitics. And what do we have here? What?
Just the name.
Yeah, Aditi Lahiri is she used to be here, and she's a ständiger Gastprofessor still, so she gives courses every once in a while. Staatsexamen, or yeah, that could be. Yeah, so she does a lot of prosody, phonology type stuff, and she did this one paper on looking at the prosody of, she did several papers of Bengali. And this is not a very good implementation because it has too many parses. But this word, this means I saw a ghost, which either means I saw a real ghost, or if it's like this, so Ami is I, Put is ghost, Deklam is I saw. Or it can mean I ghost saw, which means I got scared. Okay, so if these are together in a complex predicate, it means I was scared. If it's like this, it means I saw a ghost. Okay, so if it's like this, then let's see what happens here. So what you can see here is we have, this is our F structure, I, subject, pred is a pronoun, here's the ghost. And I have two more buttons here. This is the prosodic structure, and this is what I've been talking about as I structure. Back then we called it discourse structure, but I structure is better. So let me click on that. And what I have here is I have that the topic type is this one, and I don't actually know about this being a focus, but because I think there's no stress here, because we also we pretended that we knew about prosody. So we have a prosodic window, so this is another projection, the prosodic projection, which tells you what the prosody is of this phrase. So this is one prosodic word, this is another prosodic word, and this is a prosodic word, and they each have their own prosodic phrase. There's a low boundary tone, and there's some high tone somewhere in there. Okay, so this is all just default things. But I think if you click through to this one, you have a low tone on deklam, combined with a high tone at the end of the phrase. And that gives you contrast, that gives you focus on the verb. Okay, so it's exactly the same sentence with exactly the same subject-object, but we added in different, this is the case where the prosody is different, where we have a low-high on deklam, which in Bengali indicates that that the verb is in focus. And that's what is recorded here. Contrast to focus. Okay? We're just making up the prosody. We're not making up the prosody, we're pretending that we have the information. Yeah? And we can look at the other one. There's 3 F structures. Same. And here we have a high tone on, a low high on boot, which should mean that this is in focus. And that is in focus there. Okay, so this is stressing that particular word. So when you're saying ami but deklam, this gets to be in focus. When you say ami but deklam, that was the previous one, then the verb gets to be in focus. Yeah.
And then also semantics change?
We didn't get to the semantics. In principle, there should be another window with the semantics. But I'll show you what the rules look like. This is a very, very small grammar. And you can see that we have very complicated rules. So let's look at the VP rule. Okay? This is for dealing with the object. So this is the one you all know, ups object equals down. And then we have stuff on the prosodic projection, stuff on the discourse projection. If it's focused, then it should have this type of thing. If it's not, then it should be something else. So your rules get quite complicated, which is why we stopped. But we did it as a proof of concept so that you can see that in principle you can have all these projections, yeah? And you can have them all talking to each other. Okay, then I guess next time I will do anaphora. And that'll be that. Yeah. Okay. And then we'll start with the presentations on the 27th. Yeah.